Chapter 4. Riding the Magic Carpet. March 8th brought clearing skies and tolerable temperatures. Canada still had imposed no travel restrictions, although the government was recommending that zipping over to Iran or a vacation on a cruise ship was probably a bad idea. Although it was becoming obvious that the global spread of COVID-19 was imminent, there was absolutely nothing to prevent me from jumping on a bike and going for a nice, cool spin. It's amazing how one's body adjusts to seasonal temperatures. I'd been out walking almost every day throughout the winter, usually at least 3 miles and often more, in the fields and woods near my home, and it had to be truly cold and miserable before it bothered me. That Thursday was sunny, and the air temperature was above freezing, although not by much. And more importantly, the roads were dry and had been for a few days. I couldn't think of a single reason I shouldn't go for a ride. I didn't even try. Although the lakes were still frozen solid and the snow piled high along the roadside, the rivers were flowing and there was a sense that spring was just around the corner. The broken stand on the Eldorado was lying on the garage floor. Eventually I'll get around to welding it, but since a chipmunk had decided to chew through the welder's wiring a couple of years ago and I'd yet to fix it, the welder was out of service, so there it continued to lie. Anyway, it was time the oil in the convert had a chance to circulate. I never like to leave any of my bikes to sit too long between uses. Nasty stuff tends to congeal in the carburetors. Weird things happen to electrics and electronics. Fuel goes off, rubber bits perish, or so I'm told by people on internet motorcycle forums. I wouldn't know from personal experience. If you'd come into my garage and taken a look at the convert, you could have been excused for thinking that what I just said was complete drivel. The 2 front discs and the single rear disc were orange with rust, and looked as though they hadn't seen any action for decades. The drip tray between the wheels had a tiny pool of crimson ATF from beneath the bell housing, and the front of the engine was grey, murky, and bespattered with road gravel dust. As I wheeled it out into the sunshine, the disc pads scratched across the corroded disc surfaces, but I didn't give it a moment's care. Moto Guzzi had used cast iron discs on its bikes from this period, partly, I suspect, because they were relatively cheap, and partly because they gave good braking power when used in conjunction with the asbestos-containing brake pads available at the time. Cast iron flash rusts if it sits in a humid environment, or if the bike is parked wet, as mine usually are. I knew by the time I was at the end of the road, having used the brakes a few times, the rust would have gone, the discs would be shiny, and the brakes would have returned to their normal level of acceptable performance. So that's what I did. And they did.